If you want to be more consistent, you're in the right place. I'm Elizabeth Benton. Welcome to Consistent, a podcast by Primal Potential that is for all of you who feel frustrated by your lack of progress or overwhelmed by all the change that you want to make in your life. Here, we stop frantically chasing new habits and start strategically building a structure of consistency. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to the Primal Potential Podcast. I am Elizabeth Benton. Thanks so much for joining me. We're going to get right into it. I've been having the same conversation with clients pretty much every day for the last couple weeks where there's this pattern that I recognize. I see it in myself sometimes. It used to be my primary operating system where I could convince myself that just about any choice wouldn't really make a difference. Here's the thing. Tiny choices absolutely become heavy chains. So if you keep telling yourself this won't hurt, this one thing won't make a difference, my question is not whether or not that's true one time. My question is, how many times has that choice already cost you something? How many times has that choice already cost you something? Because that's the part most people skip. Most people aren't thinking about. They zoom in on the decision and they zoom out on the pattern and they look at the cookie. They don't look at the chain. They look at the snooze button, but not at the habit or at the purchase, but they don't look at the pattern of self-permission that keeps them from being in the same place. And the trouble with this pattern is that you're not wrong that in isolation, this one thing won't hurt, right? I think I've told you guys that I can very easily, if I have a weight loss goal, I can very easily be like, well, I mean, the cookie doesn't really make a difference. If I don't eat the cookie, I'm not going to magically lose 2 pounds. But if I do eat the cookie, I'm also not going to magically gain 2 pounds. And so, yeah, it feels super rational that this one thing won't hurt. But it's never one decision. It's death by 1,000 discounts, right? Death by 1,000 permission slips. And I've been thinking about this because it comes up so often. How do we change this pattern when we're really convinced in the moment and we're even correct in the moment that this one choice really doesn't make that big of a difference? In the moment, that is very common. Your brain goes to relax. It's a cookie. It's not a criminal record, right? And you're not wrong. Your brain says, see, it doesn't matter. But the question isn't, does this matter in isolation? The question is, what happens when this way of thinking becomes a lifestyle? Not, does this matter? Can I convince myself that it's not a needle mover? Because you can. You absolutely can convince yourself it's not a needle mover. But what happens when this way of thinking becomes your lifestyle? And that changes everything. Because the issue is not the cookie or the snooze button. It's the pattern of making decisions based on what you can convince yourself is inconsequential in the moment. And then feeling frustrated or disappointed when the accumulation of those moments is extremely consequential. It's the same thing with money, right? When I was paying off what felt like a mountain of debt, about $130,000, I could very much make the case and have it be logical that if there was a pair of shoes on sale for $70, it really didn't matter because if I didn't buy them, I wasn't meaningfully more close to my goal. And if I did buy them, it wasn't like it meaningfully changed anything for my ability to get there. And so in a narrow sense, that argument is compelling, and that's why so many people fall for it. The shoes weren't the sole reason I'm in debt, and not buying them doesn't make me financially free, so no angel gets its wings because I walked away from a sale at DSW. But repeated often enough, as it usually is, that logic becomes very costly. Not because any decision in and of itself is enormous, but because the pattern is heavy. So I want you to stop evaluating choices as though they're isolated incidents, which they feel like. It feels like we're, workout today, yes or no. Cookie today, yes or no. Item I don't need off Amazon today, yes or no. But I don't want you to evaluate them anymore as isolated decisions. I want you to see them as links in a chain. Whenever I talk about this, I think back to, I worked out with this trainer in North Carolina, not for very long because I didn't really love him, but One of the things that I remember him doing, I can see it like it was yesterday. I used to do Bulgarian split squats, which is like a movement that is deeply disrespectful. It is effective, but it is unpleasant. Not one of my favorites, only because it's hard. A Bulgarian split squat, if you're not familiar, you got your back leg elevated on a bench behind you, and you've got your front leg on the floor, and you're basically doing like a lunge, stationary, but with one leg elevated. And I would always do it holding something like dumbbells, but every once in a while, he would put these heavy chains around my neck, partially to add weight, but also because the chains would shift and move. They weren't static the way that dumbbells were. And so it forced a little bit more balance and precision with the movement. And these chains were heavy, but the links that made up the chain in and of themselves weren't particularly heavy. But when it's 10 links, 20 links, 50 links, 60 links, all of a sudden it's really heavy. And that's what's stuck with me all these years is a single link in and of itself doesn't feel like a big deal, right? You hand me one link from the chain and I'm like, whatever, I could carry it all day long, right? Slip it in my pocket, not even notice it. You give me 10, I'm probably going to notice it. You give me 50, I'm feeling it and I want to set it down. And we don't realize that we're kind of doing that. Imagine you put a link from a chain in your pocket, no big deal. But you do that 6 times a day, every day. You do that 4 times today and 12 times tomorrow and 13 times on Saturday. That's heavy, right? That's heavier. And that's how these tiny choices work. Not each one being dramatic. It's not. But because they accumulate and then we carry the cumulative weight, almost not even noticing as we slip one here and we slip one there. And all of a sudden, everything feels really hard, right? You keep calling the choice small because you're measuring the link. And I'm asking you to measure the chain. Okay? You're looking at just the link. Pfft, no big deal. I got this. No problem at all. Heck, give me 3 or 4. No problem at all. I'm not asking you to look at the link. I'm asking you to look at the chain. Totally different conversation. Because yeah, cookie, small. Skipping a workout, no big deal. Pushing that task off to tomorrow, totally fine. But how many small things are you stacking in a day, in a week, in a month? I think about this a lot as it relates to procrastination. I like to use this idea of the links in the chain because yesterday I was supposed to do something for my taxes. I'm recording this on the 14th, so tax day is Wednesday, and on Monday I was supposed to do this thing, and I'm like, there's a lot going on. One of my kids was sick. I can do it tomorrow. But I reminded myself, like, hey, it is no big deal to move this one thing to tomorrow, but how many times in today am I going to move things to tomorrow before tomorrow starts to get weighty before it's even started, right? Imagine that every item we push off to tomorrow or next week or when I have time, just not today, and all of a sudden we're feeling really weighed down, but we're evaluating and we're making the decision based on consideration of the link instead of consideration of the chain. At what point do we stop pretending that the links are random and admit that the chain is heavy? That part matters. This morning, I was trying to get out to my office to work a little bit earlier than normal because I had to stop mid-morning to do my first inspection of my beehive. And I typically don't like to have non-work things in the morning because morning is my work time. So I was telling myself, like, I'll fold the laundry later because I need to get out to my office. But that's what I considered in that moment was, hey, if I'm going to start with that narrative at 6 a.m, what's tomorrow going to look like when I've done that 6 or 7 or 8 more times throughout the day? So if I get this done 3 minutes right now, it's 3 minutes lighter for later, 3 minutes lighter for tomorrow. This isn't a conversation about food or about spending. It's about everything. When I tell myself, I don't need this to do this today, I can do this tomorrow, it sounds harmless, but I'm handing tomorrow extra weight. I'm handing later heaviness, and then tomorrow arrives, and I've got that day's responsibilities, plus yesterday's leftovers, plus last week's leftovers, plus the crap I didn't handle last month. And now the issue is not the task. The issue is the cumulative burden. Right? Just like the issue is still not the cookie. It's the cumulative burden of this one thing won't hurt. This one thing won't hurt. I'll start tomorrow. It's no big deal. People do this again and again and again, and then they say they're so overwhelmed. Yeah. Go back and listen to the last episode. What's that, 1404? On overwhelm. If you struggle with overwhelm, make yourself a note. Listen to 1404. Because overwhelm is often just postponed decisions collecting interest. And now they're heavier than they were if you hadn't have put them off. Whether that's the tax thing, the email, the workout, that pile. Later has terrible boundaries, right? It lets everybody in. Then one day, you're not dealing with one avoided task. You're dealing with the convoy of avoided tasks, and you feel like you can't navigate, right? Tiny choices become heavy chains. I want to phrase this differently because, say it one way to one person and it lands, but said another way, it lands totally differently for somebody else. And I was thinking about the way my pastor kind of addresses a similar concept, and he talks about how footholds become strongholds. A foothold is small, temporary, manageable, no big deal. You still feel like you're in control. You can still tell yourself it's casual. It doesn't feel like it's serious until it is, right? Just like the chain isn't heavy until it is. Just like the grain of rice and a second grain of rice and a third grain of rice, it's not a heap until it is. What starts as a foothold becomes a pattern, and patterns repeated enough stop feeling like choices and start feeling like limitations, like an identity, like something that you are stuck in. And that's when people start to say, like, I always do this and I can never stay consistent. And I start out strong, but I always blow it. Hey, a foothold became a stronghold, and you just had so many links in the chain that now you are weighed down and it's hard to move, right? It's not your personality. It's just practiced permission. It's a foothold that got promoted. And then once it becomes a stronghold, people start acting like it came out of nowhere, but it didn't. You actually built it. You chose it. You chose it. So you can choose something else. You built it so you can build something different. And it happens gradually, quietly. And these excuses happen convincingly. And that's what can make them really tricky, right? It doesn't arrive saying like, hi, this is the choice that's going to be the reason that you're stuck next year. It's going to sound way more reasonable than that. Like, I can start tomorrow. It's not a big deal. It's been a hard day. I can do it later. And the problem is not that those thoughts are false. The problem is that they're usually true, right? They're telling the truth selectively, but we're evaluating the link instead of evaluating the chain. Now, something that comes up when we start having this conversation inevitably is when people say like, okay, I get what you're saying, but in that moment, when it's the cookie or it's the shoes or it's the snooze button, I tell myself I don't care. And I really want to push back on this very common dialogue of like, yeah, well, I just don't care. Like, yeah, I get it. It's a pattern, but right now I don't care. I'll start caring tomorrow. I do not think that you don't care. I don't believe it. I think that it's more true that you're thinking more about permission, giving yourself permission, than you're thinking about progress, right? You do care, and you probably care deeply, and that's why it's so frustrating, and that's why it hurts. The issue is not that you don't care. It's that you're zoomed in on the immediate benefit, and you're disregarding everything else that is also real. You're just like, the cookie would be good, and the end, right? Hitting snooze would be better than getting up, conversation over. Having the shoes feels better than not having the shoes, so I'm done. But here's the truth. How you feel after is also real, right? So yeah, the cookie would be good, but there's the reality of how you feel after that choice, an hour later or a day later. It's true too that the frustration of debt is unpleasant and you want to avoid it. So yeah, it's true that you want the shoes. That's true. But it's also true that the weight of the debt is exhausting you. And the trust that you lose with yourself feels terrible. You don't need guilt. You just need a wider lens, because the story of I don't care is just not honest. It's cropped. It's super cropped. Have you ever taken a picture and maybe it's like you and a bunch of people and you just want to crop a couple of people out? I mean, it's real, but there's more to it. Right? We do this with the truth. We just crop it. We crop out some essential elements. And a crop truth is one of the brain's favorite ways to get permission. I want to give you another example, because some of you relate to the cookie and the snooze button, other of you don't. I know somebody, an acquaintance, who really wants to buy a house and feels like she and her husband can't afford it. And at the same time, spending $10 at a coffee shop they can't afford, and it feels like those two things are incongruent. Like, well, yeah, I can afford a $10 coffee, but I can't afford a house. A $10 doesn't buy a house. $10 a day, even over a week or a month or a year, doesn't buy a house. So if somebody says, well, why don't you save that coffee money? Yeah, you roll your eyes really, really hard. The point is what repeated choices become. I'm just going to give an illustration because some of you guys like more concrete illustrations, and it's hard to illustrate the cookie over time. $10 a day invested over 20 years. This friend of mine's about 40. So if since she was 20, she took $10 a day, and instead of buying coffee and a muffin, she just got a very, 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 very conservative 5% return, she'd have $125,000 right now. That's not cute coffee money anymore. That's a meaningful down payment. That's options. That's leverage. And maybe it's like, well, I can't go back in time to when I was 20. No, but you can start now and be in a radically different place in 5 years, 10 years, certainly in 20 years, right? Even apart from that math, once you start to see that $10 matters, you stop dismissing all the other little leaks, right? Now you notice the other 15 and the random 20 and the treat yourself logic, and that low-grade financial drift can stop masquerading as harmless. People keep dismissing the very, very, very moments that are building their future. And this isn't about money, right? Every one of these choices casts a vote. Not a verdict, not a moral referendum or a permanent sentence, but a vote. A vote for the version of you who follows through, or the version of you who negotiates. A vote for trust, or a vote for an excuse, a vote for alignment, or a vote for drift. And nobody likes this because it's a lot more fun to act like the decision is just a decision. It's just a link, but it's not, right? It's a chain. And it's also a rehearsal. You're practicing something. You're getting better at pause or better at impulse. You're getting better at honesty or you're getting better at convenience. You're getting better at follow through or you're getting better at justification. Repetition always wins, right? What you repeat, you reinforce. I also think of the cliche elephant example, right? Baby elephant's tied down. There's a stake. It can't break free because the stake is in the ground and they're small. And as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, they learn not to try. And it's not that the stake really has them stuck. It's just that they think that they are because they once were. We really have to think about every choice being a link. It's not a limitation on who you are. It's just the limitation of the perspective that you have. And that story is built from repetition. And so we can use the very same mechanism that built the chain to break it, link by link. That's the part I really want you to hear. This isn't me telling you that like every decision you make is this massive, huge deal. I'm not saying never eat the cookie again or you're just not going to break free. It's not it at all. It's about stop being casual with regards to the patterns that are really costing you. The next time your brain offers you some version of this won't hurt, it won't make a difference, too small to matter, I want you to remind yourself that tiny choices do in fact become heavy chains, right? It's not, can I get away with this? It's what does this reinforce? It's not, would this ruin everything? It's what link am I adding? It's not, do I feel like it? It's what am I practicing? You know, one of my favorite questions is what else is true, right? What else is true? Like, yeah, this would taste good. And also when I'm laying in bed tonight, I'm probably going to be like, why did I do that? You know? Yes, it's true that staying in bed would be great. And also true that if I do the workout, I'm going to be so glad I did. And that's going to probably feel even better than this extra 20 minutes of broken sleep. This is the very reason that defense exists, because these permission slip patterns, this one thing won't hurt, it's not going to make a difference. These are the leaks that follow us on every plan and every program. And they're the very reason that we feel like we just can't follow through. We don't need another meal plan, another budgeting app, another motivational quote or a color-coded strategy. Nope. We need help in the seconds before the permission slip gets signed by us, right? We need tools and strategies for the moment when the brain says, I'll do it tomorrow. This one thing won't hurt, because that's where momentum leaks. It's where your trust erodes. It's where footholds become strongholds. It's where chains get strengthened. I don't know that I've said this on the podcast yet, so I need to, because I've been saying it to a few of you guys over email. Our May Defense Foundations cohort is the last one where I will be offering scholarships. Initially, I was doing scholarships just for March, offering scholarships into Defense Foundations, because I just felt like, broadly speaking, there were a lot more people saying like, I can't afford it right now. Maybe there was a layoff or the idea of a layoff. And so I wanted to help out. And then there was so much demand that we did it again in April, and we're doing it again in May. But we are not doing it after May. There will not be any more Defense Foundation scholarships after this May cohort. So hear me, apply now, right? May 1st is going to be here before you know it. And we do really powerful, life-changing work on these permission slips, whether that is procrastination, justification, resignation, compensation, you name it. We tackle them. The moments where things start to fall apart for us. So if you have not completed the scholarship application, I will link it up in the show description. If you have questions about it, let me know. But stop asking whether the link is heavy and start asking what the chain is costing you. Head over to the show description for that scholarship link. If for some reason you can't find it, email me, Elizabeth at Primal Potential, and I would love to help. See you on the next episode.